Hey everybody, Michael here. We are back for another episode of Deck Tech Doctor. This deck is brought to us by Remix Master 5000. This is a Boros mid-range deck with a touch of aggro and a touch of devotion. It is called the War Leader of the Sun and Forge, and I'll just move to the description down below just so you can get a better idea of what this deck is supposed to do. So Remix wants this deck to have a strong, decent early game, and using cards such as Fiend Slayer, Paladin, and Boros Reckoner and Viashino First Blade to be able to do that, backed up by cards such as Boros Charm and Legion's Initiative to keep them safe and deal some extra damage when you can. Using Burn, of course, as well as Chain of the Rocks for removal, and dragging the mid to late game out. You can do that with Aurelia War Leader and Assemble Legion to win off of those, as well as Angel Serenity. And then you have hard to get rid of threats such as Tajik, Perforos, and Heliod as your gods. Perforos is nice in this deck to deal sort of constant damage by summoning creatures, as well as using Heliod with Perforos to create tokens to use that burn, as well as assemble the Legion late game to sort of just constantly burn them with Perforos each time those tokens are placed. Now, having said that, I think you have a lot of goals in your deck. I think you have too many goals in your deck, I guess I should say. And too many goals in your deck is going to slow your deck down. It's going to make it really messy, and it's rare that this deck doesn't seem like it's going to function very well, is what I'm going to be saying. I think that's a better way to put it. It's not going to function very well. You have a lot of, like, especially in your creature base, I think there's a lot of cards that shouldn't be in there. I think, you're playing a mid-range deck. You want to be able to have that control in the early game to be able to sort of transfer into those bigger threats, mid to late game. And including an aggro strategy within the mid-range strategy is a little bit messy, I think, because you do have aggressive cards such as Viashino, stuff like that, and Legion's Initiative makes those a little bit stronger. But what does that do to help you to start playing around things like Perforos, your Aurelia, and just using Assemble Legion to win off of that? I think you have sort of multiple goals in this deck, and I think you really need to pick one and focus on it and make it as best as you can make it. Even Devotion in this deck I don't think fits, and you can get Devotion off Boros Reckoner and stuff like that. And you can potentially get Perforos and Heliod online, but having the lack of 1 and 2 drops, no creatures and no 1 or 2 drop creatures is really going to hurt that pace and in getting them online, if that's what you should choose. Like, you have a lot of cards that can win the game by themselves, but you need more cards to supplement those strategies. Cards like Angel Serenity, when they hit the board, they can potentially win games by themselves. Aurelia the War Leader, once it hits the board, it can win game. It can win on that turn. The gods, once you get them online, if they keep swinging, they have to answer it. They can potentially win by themselves as well. Tajik can win by himself if you can have an aggressive strategy early on to keep that battalion going. Things like that. There's a lot of ways you can win. I think you need to pick one and really focus on it, because they don't work well together, I'm finding. And even cards such as Tajik I personally don't like, just because of how much removal there is in Standard right now. It gets hit by Last Breath, it gets hit by Devour Flesh, stuff like that. And because you don't have an early creature base to sort of support this, you might not even get the battalion off. So it's not a very useful card when as a 4-drop, you essentially want to be getting Perforos out there, you want to be getting Heliod out there to be able to start helping out. And even Heliod in this deck I think you could take out, because I like the idea and the synergy you have using Perforos and Assemble the Legion to just slowly burn them out until you can finish them off with War Leader's Helix or Boros Charm. And I think if I was building this deck, that would be the route I go, because I really like that idea. It's a really, really cool idea. Otherwise, I think Heliod doesn't have any good place in this deck. It gives your creatures vigilance, but by the time you play this card, you're going to have maybe one or 2 creatures out there at most, and they're not going to be cards that you're going to essentially want to sort of put out there to be potentially blocked and killed or something like that. So moving into, like, especially Viashino as an aggro, like, it's a good aggro card, and it can be strong with it can be a little bit stronger with Legion's Initiative once you get that out there. But it's a 4/4 with haste when you play it on turn. After that, it's just a 2/2, or a 3/3 if you're playing Legion's Initiative. But what's this card going to do after it's done attacking? It might just get removed. You might have to chump block with it. That's pretty much all it's going to be useful for. I think you need to move into more of a mid-game strategy and really play around sort of that early game threats and not worry about attacking early on. I think you need to worry more about your opponent's early threats. You have Chain of the Rocks, you have Mizzy Mortars, you have Lightning Strikes, but you're not playing enough of them. I think taking out the Vyoshinos, Tajiks, making room for more of that removal allows you to move better into that position where you can play around Perforos and assemble the Legion, or play towards potentially getting the gods online with Boros Reckoner and some other creatures. Like, if you this is where it's sort of hard to say, sort of suggest things on this deck, because I think there's multiple decks that are in here. I think there's multiple ways you can go, and I think the best decision would be to sort of fixate on one of those goals and really, really focus on it, rather than trying to include a whole bunch of different strategies into one deck. Because even just playtesting and goldfishing with this deck, I found it's hard to goldfish with this deck, because I end up with hands and stuff like that where I potentially can't do anything, and it forces me to mulligan, but I'm mulliganing into worse hands usually, because you're playing a lot of high drop, high costing cards, and you're playing a lot of the same sort of slots. You're playing 3 creatures that are in the 3-drop slot, but they're all sort of competing for that 3, turn 3 drop. Even something like Fiendslayer Paladin, you're playing 4 of it, but it's not really a card that helps you at all. I don't think. It helps sort of stop the bleeding. If they are playing aggressive strategy, it halts, Mutavault, stuff like that. And, can't be directed by black or red spells your opponent controls, but I think it's more of a sideboard card, Fiendslayer Paladin, and I think, turn 3, you want a Boros Reckoner out there a little bit earlier. It helps your devotion get towards potentially getting Heliod and Perforos online, and it's just overall, in my opinion, a better roadblock in most situations rather than Fiendslayer Paladin. So, I don't think I'm going to suggest too much on this deck, because I think I don't really know what way what I should suggest. I think what I suggest is to just sort of go back to the drawing board and pick one of the goals you have in here and get more supplementary cards for that. One of the main things I would say is definitely get more burn in here. You're playing a mid-range deck, so you definitely need that early game control to move into that more mid-game strategy. And having the lack of Lightning Strikes, War Leaders Helix, Mizzy Mortars is really going to hurt you, I think. And in your opening hands, you're going to end up with a lot of Fiendslayer Paladins, Boros Reckoners, Legion's Initiatives, cards that aren't going to do anything in those early turns. And when you could potentially be having burn in those hands to get rid of your opponent's early threats. So I'll just give you an example. So we'll play test and just sort of see what happens. So let's look at our opening hand for this. We have 3 land. One of them is a Nykthos, but we're not going to be having the devotion out until turn 3. Even then, it's only a Fiendslayer Paladin. We have Lightning Strike. That's good. We got an early way to burn. So play a land. Next turn, we get Legion's Initiative, so that's cool. We can play that, but that doesn't do anything. It adds 1 red, 1 white devotion, and with this sort of train, we could potentially get Heliod online. But I don't think that's really going to help. Like, it's sort of a weak strategy in that sense. We can leave up mana to burn someone, but then we can't play Legion's Initiative, and it's just the dead draw. We have multiple dead draws in our hand. Tajik is useless. Even if we get 4 mana at this point, we're potentially only going to have Fiendslayer Paladin, so he's not even going to be able to get Battalion. And so let's say we don't have to burn anything, we play our Legion's Initiative, so we have 1 extra white towards getting Heliod online with the Fiendslayer Paladin. And then we draw Perforos. So Perforos doesn't really help us. We don't have the mana to play him, Heliod, or Tajik. We can play our Nykthos, but it's just a colorless mana at this point. So really the only thing we can play, is potentially leave up mana for Lightning Strike, or play Fiendslayer Paladin. Let's say we don't have to play anything, we don't have to burn anything, so we play Fiendslayer Paladin on turn 3, sort of when you want to get him out there anyways. So that's good at least. He's ready to block some of that early game creature. And then we move to another turn. So didn't draw a land, missed our land drop, pulled one of our extremely late game cards. It happens, it's all right. So we'll just leave up mana for burn, and let's say we have to burn something at this point. And then you're not really, you don't have Vigilance with Heliod yet, so you can't really strike with Fiendslayer Paladin. And so that's not really going to do anything. And as you can see, like, it's just a lot of the cards you're going to be getting are sort of going to be dead cards. And, even if we did have the mana, getting Perforos online, getting Heliod online on turn 4, like you're sort of meant to do. I mean, well, not get him online, but get him at least on the board. They're not really doing anything. And especially Tajik, there's no other early game creature to sort of supplement that battalion, so you're not getting the full use out of him, and he's just a 2/2 that's indestructible for 4 mana, which is terrible. And Fiendslayer Paladin, since you don't have Vigilance with Heliod yet, at this point you don't really want to attack with him. He's the only creature you have on the board, and he's better sort of as defending those early game creatures, but at turn 5 he can potentially just get destroyed, burned. Well, not burned, but destroyed or exiled or something like that. There's a lot of ways that he can be removed at this point. So next turn we do add our land drop. But now you have a lot of sort of different ways you can go. Like, what do we want to do? Tajik's still a dead draw in our hand. I can get Heliod out there and then create another token. We can get Perforos out there to sort of lead into something else and start burning them, but it's already turn 6, and at this point I haven't pulled any removal from my opponent's creatures. So this is goldfishing, and this is assuming they have nothing on the other side of the board. But when you're playing Magic, there's obviously going to be other threats on the board, and by turn 6 they're obviously going to have creatures out there that are hitting you and things like that, and we have no ways to deal with them. We have one War Leader's Helix to sort of stop the bleeding a little bit with that 4 health, and we can potentially get one creature off the board, but I mean, it doesn't really help us. And we have another dead draw with Angel Serenity. And I pull a Boros Charm, and I've done this. I've goldfished with this deck multiple times, and I'm finding like it's always the same situation. Like, we have a lot of dead draws in our hand, and I think one of the main reasons is because of the count of creatures that you have in your deck. You have 4 Boros Reckoners, 4 Fiendslayer Paladins, 4 Legions, and 4 Legions initiatives. Cards that you don't essentially want in your opening hands all the time. At least in this sort of strategy, like War Leader's Helix is a dead draw. I've restarted it multiple times, stuff like that. Like, this one's better. I mean, turn 1 scry. We get a land, and we definitely want a land in this deck, so we keep it on top. I can't play anything turn 1. Turn 2, we can get our Legions initiative out there. Turn 3, we can shock ourselves and get Boros Reckoner out there, or Viashino First Blade. So, I mean, this is what I mean. Like, which one do you want out there? They're sort of competing for that first spot. And you can play a little bit more aggressively with Viashino, but after that, it's sort of just a chump blocker at this point. With Boros Reckoner, you have a bigger body to block with, and in my opinion, it would be the better choice than Viashino. I think it's just a much better card than Viashino in almost every way, unless you're playing a purely aggressive strategy, but which you're not. So I don't see any use of Viashino. So we play our Boros Reckoner, get another land out there. We can shock ourselves to get Perforos online or get Tajik out there, but Tajik's sort of pointless because we don't have a lot of creatures out there to attack with yet. But again, there's a lot of different ways we can take, but we might have to leave up some mana for removal with War Leader's Helix. So yeah, it's just overall a little bit messy, and I think there's just too many strategies trying to compete with each other, and they're all good strategies, but I think you need more supplementary cards for those specific strategies. So that's my suggestion. I think just refining it a little bit more, focusing on one goal is the better way to go, and getting rid of some of the cards that you don't really need, such as Fiendslayer Paladin, and Viashino, First Blade, Tajik, stuff like that. I definitely would say, for one, is definitely get more removal in there. Make Chain to the Rocks a 4 of. Bump up some of the Legion to 2 of, to just to sort of help that draw, to make sure you get it, by turn 5. Mizium Mortars, make it a 4 of even. It's just a really, really good, easy removal card for early game, or potentially a late game board wipe. 4 copies of Lightning Strike even still is really, really nice. Just getting more burn in there, especially for that removal package, would definitely help your pace transfer over to that mid to late game strategy. I don't really agree with trying to include an aggro strategy within this deck, because you're sacrificing a lot of early game removal for potentially dead drawing cards such as Tajik and stuff like that. So yeah, there's my suggestions. I mean, that's probably what I would do with the deck. And again, to anyone who's watching, definitely leave your own comments and suggestions on this deck. What would you do it? How would you help it out? Because I'm only one opinion, I'm only one view, and having multiple takes on a deck is a lot easier to sort of help refine it. And that is definitely why I make these episodes, so people can sort of have discussions on decks and sort of help that person out as a community of Magic. So again, thanks a lot, Remix Master, for sending me in your deck, and I definitely hope people send me in some more of their decks. It's really, really fun to do this, and I hope I am helping people with their decks. Definitely, when you guys are making your decks, and I do send them back like this, once you update them, I would definitely love to look at them again and sort of have a revisit, just on my own. I probably won't have to make a revisit video for them, but I definitely would like to see where the deck's going, how it's progressing, and potentially playtest it in the future. But that's all I have for today, and I definitely hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching.